And we're back. Did you miss me? Of course you did. Am I still wearing this flamingo shirt? Yes. Why? Because it's still hot. If you're following along, we're reading Almost Odis by me, Dusty Thompson. If you're following along, we're on page 259, the blog dated Sunday, July 7th, 2013. It's about to get real up in here, y'all. I have been blogging about the dad living with me for almost 2 years. I can't believe it's really been that long, but it has. 21 months to be exact. I didn't really know what to expect when he arrived, but I figured it would be log-worthy, hence the blog. It has not been a smooth transition, but it also hasn't been as bad as it could have been. While I understand he is still, after 13 years, grieving the loss of my mother, there are personality quirks he possesses which continue to confound me. In full disclosure, I have admitted some of my own quirks, like the all-consuming need to have a house which smells pretty and feels fancy. 2 phrases to which my father likes to roll his eyes ever so sarcastically. He reminds me of a dramatic teenager. He reminds me of, well, me when I was in my late teens. My early teens were mostly about being loved by all and sundry, and I was more obsequious than anything. My 15 years in federal healthcare has given me insight into what many veterans of his generation think, feel, and expect. But it wasn't until recently I even considered his lifelong anger may have been undiagnosed PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder is something you hear about on TV with those now returning from war, and even the subject of a couple of movies, mostly on Lifetime and usually starring Meredith Baxter, no longer Bernie, now lesbian, as the long-suffering wife. He has been very depressed lately, not finding joy in anything. He has, I feel, PTSD, but refuses to admit anything is wrong. Talking about feelings is unmanly. Feeling unhappy is unmanly, he says. Openly pouting when he doesn't get his way, however, he finds completely acceptable. It's an odd dichotomy. My mother had a response to me whenever I was self-hating and expressed something negative about myself. She would always say, "Don't talk about my son like that." I don't know why it popped into my head, but the other day the dad was berating himself for something he couldn't or wouldn't explain what. But I said, "Don't talk about my dad like that." He looked at me all confused, and I tried to explain it was one of my mother's habits. He smiled for just a second, but then went back to angry within the space of a head turn. It never occurred to me he might have a legitimate reason to be angry and distrustful. I never really gave much thought to why he is almost agoraphobic and seems scared of the world in general. I always assumed he was just a chip off the old block, as his father was someone who was, for the longest time, my frame of reference for a terrible person. I never really stopped to even think of why he would be so unhappy, that he truly hated himself. When I asked him why he hated himself, he seemed confused and asked me, "Don't everybody hate themselves?" To which I answered, "No, they don't. I don't, and you shouldn't." What I didn't say was, I did until I turned 40 and finally decided I was who I was, and if people didn't like me, I was far too old to care. Jesus understands me, and that is all I need to know. That Jesus understands my dad was an idea I never really considered. Some have asked if I feel I make fun of the dad in my blog, and initially I was defensive, stating I was simply reporting facts, not trying to make fun of him. When in all honesty, there was sometimes an edge to the humor, a need to distance myself from him and who I thought he represented. For so long, I didn't want to be from where I was from. I didn't want to be from a family that was often lower middle class from a financial perspective, depending on the job situation. I didn't want to have so many relatives who live in trailers, which I still refer to as prefabricated housing, because it sounds funny and I can then laugh at those folks, not realizing I was hurting people who are good people, as if money is any indication of the quality of the person. I always wanted to be somebody other than who I was. I never saw what was so great about me, what was so special. I never put much thought into whether I was smart or funny or ambitious or loyal or any of those traits I have come to appreciate. I was only focused on what I didn't have, which was money, looks, self-esteem. Truth be told, I wasn't aware of self-esteem enough to know I didn't have any. Like my father, I thought everyone hated themselves. Well, not everybody, but most people. Growing up gay and so far in the closet I was almost homophobic, in a Southern Baptist family in Texas and Mississippi wasn't the easiest thing to do, to be sure. But when I told the dad at the ripe old age of 24, he said he already knew and he didn't care. It was not the reaction I expected, and for some reason I never really appreciated how hard it must have been for him. From what I've been told, he shared this information by standing up at a family reunion, on his side of the family, and announced it to all in attendance I was gay. I wasn't there, but it did save me a lot of letter writing and phone calls. I already wasn't the son he expected as his oldest, his namesake. As an almost Otis, I spent most of the time since the age of 12 wishing I could be someone else, an actual Otis. I knew I wasn't and didn't know how to be someone different, but it didn't stop me from praying every night to wake up as the son he wanted. There were many nights I prayed to just not wake up at all. Trying to be someone you're not is difficult in any circumstance, and I eventually had to give up and just deal with the reality that I was destined to remain almost Odis, not even truly understanding what that meant. I just knew almost Odises didn't live in the boonies. I was the plaid koala bear in my family, and once I realized I was different, I spent most of my adult life attempting to rewrite my story, to reimagine my narrative. To the point that my nieces and nephews are apparently under the impression I spent my childhood at boarding school and want to show me how to ride a horse or drive a four-wheeler. When I remind them that I knew how to do those things, they seem confused, as if a member of the royal family suddenly appeared next to them at the Dollar General buying generic aspirin and Little Debbie snack cakes. I'm assuming they sell other things at the Dollar General. The dad buys Little Debbie snack cakes and aspirin, so I don't really know. June is Gay Pride Month. I attended the parade and festival in San Francisco with some friends. My surprisingly supportive father asked why I had never attended Pride, and I told him half jokingly to attend a Pride event, theoretically one should be proud. Until very recently, I was not. I wanted to be gay even less than those members of my family who are still not supportive and those who, until this very moment, didn't have confirmation. Surprise! I apologize for springing this on you, although to be fair, how surprised could you be? You've met me before. From the ages of 12 through 40, I was your typical self-loathing Southern Baptist homosexual, the likes of who published painfully narcissistic coming-of-age memoirs with prodigious efficiency. I won't to go into any Memoir Reflections today. You'll have to wait for the publication you know is forthcoming. And I wrote it during Corona. Hopefully it will be published in the spring. Fingers crossed. And this is fingers crossed. I am not flipping the bird like it seemed like in a previous video. Suffice it to say, I had spent so much time thinking about my issues, I never really gave thought to anyone else's, especially my dad's. I realized as much as I expected him to hate me, he didn't. And I never really gave him credit for it. Unfairly, I glossed over the fact that my mother went to her grave devastated and convinced that I was wrong about my orientation. So desperate for her sweet, precious boy to be normal, she tried to find me a girlfriend as she lay dying in the hospital. It took me more than 10 years to find it within myself to feel as if I wasn't a walking disappointment and to think I was worth something. That she never got to see my career success and happiness has always left a trace of sadness around the edges of my personality. And I wish she could have met Ben too. She would have adored Ben. The last few years, the dad has been supportive, constantly saying he loves me and he didn't care I was gay. And for some reason, I didn't care that he didn't care. He had his role written in my teenage mind, and I refused to allow him to rewrite it. I took all my hurt out on him by keeping a distance, which he didn't know how to bridge. How do you apologize for something like that? As much as I expected him to toe the line when he moved in, he didn't. He also didn't specifically try to get on my nerves, and it has been somewhat accepting of the changes I have forced upon him. He eats what I cook, he voluntarily washes dishes, and recycles with the fervor of a tree hugger. He even sometimes acquiesces to my request for him to wear something other than his house shoes, slippers to my Yankee friends, scuffs to my friends in Lafayette County, Mississippi. To the Walmart, when truth be told, who cares what he wears to Walmart? I should just be happy he's still around. What I wouldn't give for one more day with my mother. I am keenly aware I have a limited number of minutes with him before as he approaches his 72nd birthday later this month. Why can't I just enjoy what he wants to do? Why do I have to put so many parameters on our relationship? I know we aren't what the other necessarily wanted in a father-son, but we are what we have, and I am grateful I got his sense of humor and his generosity. I am less thankful I got his fiery temper, short legs, and weird feet. For better or for worse, I am what I am, and before someone bursts into song, I will say, although I have sometimes begrudgingly cared for him these past 2 years, I hope it still counts as love. We've discussed that God doesn't have a last nerve, and I hope the dad doesn't either. If he does, I haven't found it yet. And we'll stop there and see you next time. Thanks.